Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel, Study with Shakira. So today we'll be reviewing AP Psychology Unit 1. So, psychology. It's a scientific study of behavior and mental processes. What causes our brain to act a certain way? Nature versus nurture. Nature are genetic factors. The influence of biology, genes, and hereditary factors on behavior and traits. Nurture is environmental factors, the influence of learning, experience, and environment on behavior. External factors. So which one has a bigger effect on someone's personality, behavior, or mental state? I don't know. No one knows. Behavior genetics is a study of the relative power and limits of genetic and environmental influences on behavior. So, the question: does nature or nurture have a bigger effect on someone's personality, behavior, or mental state? There are many different approaches to it in psychology. Some are the biological approach, which says nature, behavioral approach says nurture, cognitive approach basically says nurture, humanistic approach basically is balanced, psychodynamic approach is basically nature, socio-cultural approach is nurture. Evolutionary approach is nature. And you don't have to memorize all this right now because we'll be learning about all these approaches throughout the curriculum. So, evolutionary approach by Charles Darwin. The evolutionary approach is natural selection's effect on someone's behavior or mental processes. Basically, favorable traits and characteristics get passed down. The issue is, if you apply natural selection to society, it leads to social Darwinism. Thus, it becomes easy to discriminate against others to have quote-unquote less favorable characteristics. Eugenics is an ideology that's primary purpose is to only make the people that have the most quote-unquote desirable traits have sex so their kids would improve the human race. Also, then this ideology was discredited as unscientific. An example is like World War II. Nazi used this ideology to discriminate against Jews. Twin studies. The Minnesota twin study helped show nurture as identical twins raised apart still showed significant similarities in personality and intelligence. Identical twins have more likely chance than fraternal twins to share behavioral disorders. If a fraternal twin divorces, there's a 1.6 times greater chance the other twin divorces, while if identical twin divorces, there's a 5.5 times greater chance of the other twin divorcing. So identical twins are from the same egg, and then they separate, but fraternal twins are two separate eggs. The nervous system. So the purpose of the nervous system is to keep the body balanced, homeostasis. So, first, to receive messages, example like what your hand touches, blood pressure, etc. Then it figures out what the message means. Then sends out the right instructions to anywhere in the body, like organs or muscles. So, the central nervous system includes the brain and the spinal cord. Its job is to interpret all information that comes in and sends it out to order the body and what to do. It's like the control center. Once messages set out of the CNS, it goes to the peripheral nervous system. The peripheral nervous system. It acts as a messenger system. It carries info in and out of the central nervous system, and there are two types. The somatic nervous system. It controls voluntary movements of muscles. Examples like typing, walking, etc. Second is the autonomic nervous system, which controls involuntary functions like breathing, heartbeat, digestion. And there are two types to autonomic nervous system, which is a sympathetic nervous system, which prepares your body for action, stress, or emergencies. It's the body's fight or flight responses. And the parasympathetic nervous system, which calms the body down afterwards. So this is an image that shows that the nervous system has two separate things, the central and the peripheral nervous system. And the peripheral nervous system is broken down into the autonomic and somatic. And then the autonomic is broken down into the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. So now we're going to be moving on to reflexes. So an example of the reflex is if you stub your toe. So the reflex arc is a dedicated neural pathway that controls your reflex movements. First is a stimulus. Something happens, like you stub your toe. The pain receptor is your toe detects it. And then the sensory neurons, so affer means arrives. So it carries the signals to the brain and spinal cord. It sends the signal through the peripheral nervous system, specifically the somatic one, because there's different sections in the peripheral nervous system. And then it sends it to the central nervous system, which is, in this case, the spinal cord. And there is an interneuron, which processes information quickly, the reflex. And then the motor neuron, it sends it to the motor neurons, which is efferent, which means like exit, like it carries the signals away from the brain and spinal cord and sends it back through the somatic nervous system again. It goes back to the peripheral nervous system, which then it goes to the effector. The muscles in your foot, leg move, and then the signal goes to your brain, and then you feel the pain. So basically, what makes this a reflex is, first off, is an interneuron. In a regular way this works, the interneuron usually isn't there, and it goes to your brain after that. And it all happens while your autonomic nervous system responds involuntarily. Then the parasympathetic nervous system will calm your body and restore homeostasis. So this all occurs without it going through your brain at first, because it's a reflex. Nervous systems work through electrical and chemical pulses that transmit information and responses. Neurons which transmit information. Glial cells provide help with structure, insulation, communication, and waste transport. Focusing on one individual neuron now. The way things are communicated are through a chain of neurons. For a signal to be fired, an action potential must be reached. So basically, there's a bunch of positive ions outside waiting to enter a neuron, which a neuron has negative ions. This is a neuron at resting potential. When a stimulus occurs, the positive ions on the outside go into the neuron. This process is called depolarization until a threshold is reached. Then action potential fires completely and it's at full strength going into the chain of neurons. It's always at full strength. There's no in between. It's the all or nothing principle. Then causes a short time when another action potential can't happen, and that's called the refractory period. So, a single neuron. The signal releases a neurotransmitter, but what does a neurotransmitter do? So this is how a single neuron looks like. So first, it's the dendrites, which receive signals from the previous neuron. And then the soma, which is the cell body. It houses the nucleus of the cell, which contains neurons, genetic material, and different cell activities. Then signal then goes to the axon, which carries the electrical signal away from the soma towards other neurons or muscles. It's protected by the myelin sheath, a fatty insulation that speeds up the signal, and the gaps between the sheath are called nodes of Ranvier, where the signal jumps, speeding the transmission even more. Then it gets transported into the axon terminal, which releases the neurotransmitters, which are the chemical messengers, into the synaptic cleft, which are the small gaps between the neurons, where the neurotransmitter travels and then get caught by another dendrite of another neuron, and then it continues and continues. Neurotransmitters. So different neurotransmitters are sent based on the situation. So dopamine is a reward, motivation, pleasure, movement, and it's related to addiction and Parkinson's disease, which Parkinson's disease is about, movement, so that makes sense. Serotonin regulates mood, sleep, and appetite, and sometimes perception, so low levels can lead to depression. Norepinephrine increases alertness, arousal, and attention. It's part of the stress response. Acetylcholine, muscle movement, memory, and learning. Low levels of it leads to Alzheimer's. Glutamate is a main excitatory neurotransmitter. It's important for learning and memory. GABA is a main inhibitory neurotransmitter, calming neural activity. So low levels can lead to anxiety. Endorphins are pain relief and boost pleasure, the natural feel-good chemicals. Substance P carries pain messages to the brain. Hormones. Similar to neurotransmitters, except they travel through bloodstream, so they're slower and longer lasting. So some hormones are adrenaline, also known as epinephrine. It triggers the flight or fight response, increasing heart rate, energy, and alertness. Melatonin regulates sleep-wake cycles. Leptin signals satiation and reduces appetite. Ghrelin stimulates hunger. Oxytocin promotes bonding, trust, and social connection, known as a love hormone. Now moving on to drugs. Agonists mimic or boost neurotransmitters, encouraging neural firing. Antagonists block receptor sites, which discourages firing. Reuptake inhibitors block reabsorption of neurotransmitters, leaving neurotransmitters in the synaptic cleft. Drugs have 4 forms. Stimulants, which cause increased neural activity, such as caffeine, nicotine, and cocaine. Depressants decrease neural activity, such as alcohol, and the type of drug barbiturates, which slows down the CNS, the central nervous system. Hallucinogens distort perception. Examples are marijuana and LSD. Opioids offer pain relief and a euphoric feeling. Examples are like heroin or morphine. So, now moving on to the brain. First off is the brainstem. It's needed for survival and communication between brain and body. It contains a medulla, which controls breathing, heart rate, and like swallowing. The pons helps with sleep, arousal, and facial movements, and it relays info between the cerebellum and the cortex. The midbrain handles movement, visual and auditory reflexes. It contains the reticular formation, which is like arousal and alertness. So, first off is the hindbrain. It's the basic life functions, like balance and coordination as well. So it has a medulla, as established the definition before, and the pons, and the cerebellum, which is like the little brain. It kind of looks like a cauliflower to me. Brain, coordination, and motor learning. And now the midbrain, movement and sensory relay. It has a reticular formation, which we said arousal, attention, and alertness, and also has a substantia nigra, which produces dopamine and, voluntary movement. Then is the forebrain, which is complex thinking and emotion. It has a thalamus, the sensory relay station. It has all the sensories except for smell. The hypothalamus, which has hunger, thirst, temperature, and sexual behavior. Think like hypo, like homeostasis. The amygdala is fear, aggression, and emotional memories. It's like the alarm systems. The hippocampus forms long-term memories, though. I like to think the hippo remembers everything. 4 is the cerebral cortex, which is thinking, planning, and perception. So there's the prefrontal cortex, which is higher level thinking, decision making, judgment, impulse control, social behavior, etc. The frontal lobe, which is voluntary movement, which is like motor cortex, it's part of the frontal lobe. Motor cortex is part of the frontal lobe, and it's also like planning, problem solving, and personality. Which is the prefrontal cortex, the frontal area is like the last part to develop throughout your life. The parental lobe is like pressure, touch, body position. So the parental lobe is basically pressure and position. And the somatosensory cortex is in it, which is feeling your body and touch. The temporal lobe is hearing, language, and memory. The occipital lobe is vision. So the left hemisphere contains the Broca's area, which is in the frontal lobe, which is speech production. The Wernicke's area is in the temporal lobe, which is language comprehension. Damage to either leads to aphasia. The corpus callosum connects the left and right hemispheres. The pituitary gland is a master gland, and it controls hormones, and it works with the hypothalamus. Plasticity is the ability to rewire or form new connections so that other areas can sometimes take over functions of damaged regions, especially early in life. So if one part of your brain is damaged, plasticity can happen so other parts of the brain can take the role. Moving on to research methods. So there's EEGs, which measure electrical activity, fMRIs, which show brain regions through blood flow. Case studies like the Phineas Gage, which is a guy that had a metal rod through his brain, highlights how damage changes can change behavior. Lesioning or surgical procedures have been used to examine specific functions of the brain. Sleep. Consciousness, your awareness of thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and what's going on around you. Wakefulness is like being awake, alert, and just of your thoughts and feelings and surroundings. Sleep is a natural, reversible state of unconsciousness. You're less aware, but your brain is still active. The circadian rhythm is sleep-wake cycles, the biological cycle that repeats roughly every 24 hours. That's sometimes called the biological clock. Jet lag and shift work can disrupt the rhythm, which can lead to fatigue, poor performance, and changes in mood. So, stages of sleep. It's identified by wave patterns measured on an EEG, which should look like this. And a full night of sleep typically has about 4 to 6 full 90-minute cycles. A single sleep cycle is broken into stages and repeats throughout the night. So, the stages of sleep. Let's go through one 90-minute cycle. So, NREM1. It's light sleep. You may experience like sensations, like feeling like you're falling, which lasts like 5 to 10 minutes. And then non-REM2, which is deeper and characterized by sleep spineless on an EEG, which is 10 to 25 minutes. Then non-REM3 is the deepest stage, sometimes called slow wave sleep. As night progresses, NREM3 gets shorter and less frequent. Then it re-enters non-REM2, again for a couple of minutes. And then it reaches REM, rapid eye movement. EEG shows similar to wakefulness. Body is extremely relaxed and essentially paralyzed. Most dreaming occurs in REM. Amount of REM sleep increases across the night. After one cycle is over, it repeats over and over again until you wake up. REM rebound occurs when you're deprived of REM, so spending extra time in REM the next time you sleep. Why do we dream? Nobody knows, but here are some theories. The activation synthesis theory of dreaming. It suggests dreams are the brain's attempt to make sense of random neural activity. The consolidation theory says dream is tied to organizing and storing memories. More about sleep. Sleep itself may help with memory consolidation and restoration of energy and resources used during the day. Sleep disorders. Insomnia is a disorder where you have difficulties falling or staying asleep. Narcolepsy is a disorder where you, out of nowhere, would fall asleep suddenly with no warning. Sleep apnea is when there's interrupted breathing during sleep. REM sleep behavior disorder is when you act out dreams. Somnambulism is just like a crazy word for sleepwalking. Treatments often include sleep hygiene and consistent schedules to improve waking behavior and overall well-being. Senses. Sensation is a process of detecting information from the environment that meets a certain threshold and converting it into neural signals for the brain to process as perception. Absolute threshold. Point where stimulus can be detected, at least 50% of the time. Just noticeable difference is the minimum change needed to notice a difference. Weber's law is the minimum change that must be proportional to the original stimulus. Sensory adaptation is we become less sensitive to constant unchanging stimuli. Synesthesia is where one sense is experienced through another. Vision, the eye. So first, light enters the eye. The cornea is the clear outer layer. It bends, refracts the eye to help focus it. Then it enters the pupil. The black hole is the center, lets the light in. And the iris, the colored part, controls pupil size. So a bright light, the pupil shrinks. A dark light, the pupil gets bigger. Focusing the image. Lens changes shape to focus light onto the retina. This process is called accommodation, which the lens changes shape to focus on near versus far objects. 3. The image hits the back of the eye. The retina, the inner layer with photoreceptors, where light turns into neural signals. There are 2 important cells you need to know. Rods, which see black and white. It's good in dim light and peripheral vision. Cones see color, need bright light. It sees details and faces reading. 4. Special spots on the retina. The fovea, which is the center of the retina, is packed with cones, best vision, and sharp details. The blind spot is where the optic nerve leaves. No receptors. You literally can't see there, the blind spot. 5. The signal leaves the eye. The optic nerve carries signals to the brain. The optic chiasm is where the nerve partially crosses, so the left visual view goes to the right part of the brain, and vice versa. And also the blind spot, it makes up because you have 2 eyes, so you can see. Then the brain processes it. It goes to the thalamus, then the occipital lobe, where you actually see. So this is like a phrase you can think of: clear people in love read only books, which stands for the process that goes on. So the eye. The trichromatic theory, which is color vision. You have 3 types of cone: red, green, and blue, and a combo of these colors are all colors. So the opponent process theory is your brain doesn't see colors individually, it sees them in opposite pairs, called opponent pairs. These are the pairs, and this helps you produce and see after images, like when you stare at an image and you look away, you see that image. Vision issues. Color vision deficiency happens when cones or opponent cells are damaged, such as dichromatism, which only 2 types of cones are working, or monochromatism, which only 1 or no types of cones work. They're nearsighted, which they can't see far, and farsighted, which they can't see close. So brain damage and what brain damage can do to seeing. So there's prosopagnosia, I have no idea to say that, but as face blindness. Blind sight is the ability to respond to visual stimuli without consciously perceiving them. Now, hearing. So first, the sound enters through the ear. So sound waves are the vibration in the air. The outer ear, the pinna, the ear flaps, collects the sound. The auditory canal funnels sound inwards. Step 2. The sound hits the eardrum. The eardrum vibrates when the sound hits it. Step 3. The middle ear amplifies the sound. It has 3 tiny bones: the hammer, the anvil, and the stirrup. They amplify, they increase the vibrations. Step 4, the inner ear, which is the most important part, has a cochlea, a snail-shaped, and it's filled with fluid. So the vibrations happen, then the fluid moves, and then it triggers hair cells to move as well. Hair cells are found in the basilar membrane. They convert vibrations into neural signals. Step 5, the signal goes to the brain. The auditory nerve sends signals, then it goes to the thalamus, then the temporal lobe where you actually hear. So this is the way it goes. So sound properties. There's pitch, so high versus low sound is determined by frequency. Loudness, volume, which is determined by amplitude. There's theories of pitch. So place theory. Different pitches are heard because sound waves stimulate different places on the basilar membrane, which is in the cochlea. Frequency theory, which is pitch is determined by the rate at which auditory nerve pulses fire, matching the frequency of the sound wave. The volley theory, groups of neurons fire in alternating bursts so that their combined firing rate matches the frequency of the sound waves. Hearing problems. The conduction hearing loss is a problem in the outer or middle ear, so sound doesn't really reach the cochlea properly. The sensorineural hearing loss is a problem in the inner ear, the hair cells or nerve, which is often permanent. Deafness can be from the conduction or sensorineural issues. The cochlear implants, which is like hearing aids, they're a device that bypasses damaged hair cells and sends signals directly to the auditory nerve. Senses. The olfaction, which is smell, transduces stimuli through receptors in the nose. Pheromones are chemical signals that can influence behavior. Gustation is taste, which involves receptors for like sweet, salty, sour, etc. People can have very indifferent taste sensitivities, like there's super tasters, medium tasters, even non-tasters. The vestibular sense helps with balance, using the semicircular canals and brain structures to monitor head movement. Kinesthetics is the sense of body movement and position, allowing coordination without constant visual monitoring. Pain. So there's a gate control theory that suggests that pain signals can be blocked or allowed through a spinal gate. And the phantom limb sensations happens when amplitudes still feel pain or sensation in a missing limb.
Like and subscribe and comment.